National's been talking about the terrible price of houses. Chewy, housing prices are terrible. Labor's fault that it's so hard to get into a house these days. So National, you would hope, are going to do everything they can to help Kiwis get into homes. Well, it appears, Chewy, that what they're going to do, such is the rumour that they are unwilling to deny, what they are going to do is allow international buyers back into the market again, thus increasing the pool of people who want to buy houses with a much deeper pocket of a better exchange rate than New Zealanders. Let's have a look at the story, then we'll chat.
Well, the government took aim at National today for hinting that changes to the ban on foreign property buyers may be on the way. And outside Parliament, there is one man who may have just found the platform he needs to get back inside. Here is political editor Jenna Lynch.
3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, quarter-acre, doer-upper. Only Kiwis need apply because in New Zealand, existing homes are only available for Kiwis to buy.
We want to make sure that New Zealand home buyers are front of the queue for buying New Zealand properties. Having foreign speculators coming in and snapping up New Zealand houses isn't going to be in New Zealand's best long-term interest.
A pretty uncontroversial policy, one would say, Chewy.
Yeah, that's true, and I mean quite tactical as well. Like you can be an overseas buyer and come in and buy some land and build something on it, but you can't buy existing.
Yeah, and this was brought in by Labor. I remember there is a bunch of xenophobia around some foreign buyers, and it's not around actual foreign buyers, people who live offshore and buy but don't settle here. The xenophobia around it, and I used to get this a lot when I was doing Talkback, is people would phone up and talk about all these foreign people buying in Auckland, and it was something like 2% of the purchases, or less than 2%. No, sorry, it was like 2% of 2% were foreign buyers. But what was happening is there's a large migrant population in Auckland who have accents, and particularly Asian. So they would be residents of New Zealand, but they would turn up to an auction, they would buy the house, and the naturalised born Kiwi who lost the house would go, fucking foreigners. And so there is an amount of xenophobia, which is around people going, if you've got an accent, you're not a New Zealander. But this is not that. This is people who actually don't reside in New Zealand, who live offshore buying property in New Zealand and not residing here. So there's two things to think about, right? So Labor hasn't done the xenophobic part of this, which is people with accents aren't allowed to buy houses. They've set up in, I think, 2018, that if you don't live in New Zealand, you're not allowed to buy a house. And I think the year before they brought it in, there was something like 3,500 sales. I'll check that actually. Maybe it was less than that, but it was in the thousands of sales to foreign nationals. This last year, I think there was 100. So, you can see it's done the job that it said it would do. So
I mean, when Labor brought that in, like they did it in a particularly clumsy way. Like I remember the phrase, Chinese sounding names being part of it, which just opened them up to all sorts of, in my opinion, incredibly worthwhile criticism, because it just wasn't how you would want to pitch a policy.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right, we'll keep going with the story. So spelling it out, that's what the story is, right? Labor brought in this policy that if you don't live in New Zealand, you can't buy a house, which seems uncontroversial.
But if there's a change of government, it could be a foreigner free-for-all. Yesterday, National leader Christopher Luxon wouldn't rule it out.
The National government overturned the foreign buyers ban?
Look, I mean, we'll have more to say about that with our investment policy that we'll announce in the next few weeks.
Which means yes.
Clearly, there's got to be restrictions on foreign buyers. We think that's appropriate, but we'll have more to say shortly.
I think he should tell New Zealanders what he's going to do about that.
Today, still playing wait and see.
We'll have an overseas investment plan, part of our broader economic plan that we'll announce very shortly.
Not ruling out.
And look, just on this, I'm actually okay with that answer. But what I'm not okay with is the National Party expecting Labor to announce their GST policy early when they released it, but now playing like, no, we're not going to release it. We're not going to release it. But them not doing the same for Labor. I do have a problem with that, Chewy.
Yeah. I'm the same as you. I don't have a problem with Luxon saying, hey, look, we'll have something coming up. That there is no problem with that. Like we'll save the criticism until we bloody hear it. I'm sure it's horrific.
All right. Well, let's keep hearing what we're hearing, which is sort of the prelude to hearing the actual policy.
out selling the Kiwi dream to the highest bidder.
We will announce our policy on overseas investment very shortly.
In
means there is
2018,
one.
the Labour New Zealand First Coalition banned foreign investors from buying most homes here. It was somewhat controversial.
And the criticism of your government was that it was xenophobic.
Well, I do not agree with that. I think it is the birthright of New Zealanders to have first dibs on our land.
As a principle, do you believe that Kiwis should rent houses from foreign landlords?
As a principle, I want as many New Zealanders in home ownership as possible.
New Zealanders should live in their own houses. They shouldn't rent them from overseas owners.
Winston Peters has been
Here he
campaigning
comes.
against foreign buyers for decades.
Since the 1920s.
Two wrongs don't make a right.
New Zealanders
Oh,
need
for
to be able to, in a housing
fuck's
crisis,
sake.
not be competing with foreign buyers who don't live here.
Everybody in New Zealand can be reassured that we will be acting in New Zealand's national interests.
I would have thought they'd had enough sense not to go down that track.
Bit problematic if the Nats need him.
When tossing up that policy, are you thinking about how it might impact?
Now, this is a tangent, but there's something I really want to get into. The man on screen right now, and if you're listening to the podcast, we're looking at, looks like a thumb, only larger. He is using this phrase, which he hasn't used recently, about the coalition of chaos.
That's going to come back to bite him.
I just think, and he's talking about a partnership now for a man who appears to have conspiracy theorists, anti-vaxxers, denying 9/11, in his party. And another person who wants to make $1 billion of cuts on day one. These are the people he's going to have to rely on. So if the other group are the coalition of chaos, maybe they're the coalition of cookers. Maybe we can go full circle and bring it back.
The partnership of pricks, the axis of assholes.
I just kind of think it's a bit of a theme here about people being hoisted by their own petard, that they are setting themselves up to have to work with, I'm going to say arguably, it's not arguable in my mind, but some people argue it, a far worse, more chaotic, more kooky partnership duo than would be on the left if the left had enough to get through. It is just chef's kiss. It is just delightful. I'm loving it.
Impact your relationship with Winston Peters?
No.
Look, every smart vehicle needs a handbrake.
The self-heralded handbrake finding familiar and fertile voting turf.
And Jenna, what is National up to here?
Until they actually open their mouths and spill what the policy...
Isn't it interesting that the shadow that she's getting makes it look like she's wearing a 1970s rugby league jersey? You know, rugby league jerseys have always got that V on them. Do you know what I mean? And it's just the shadow from wherever the lighting is. No offense taken, not mocking. I'm just saying that's what it makes it look like.
Is going to be, it's a little bit hard to say, but if they were to reverse this foreign buyers ban, the government says that would be irreversible. We couldn't put the ban back on because of the implications it would have for our trade agreements. By not ruling this out, Christopher Luxon has opened the door on an old debate that was pretty well settled. No one was really talking about it, but he's also potentially opened the door for Winston Peters to come barnstorming back on through. Peters built his firebrand on this stuff. It is the name of his party, New Zealand First. He thrives on protectionist sentiment. So not only is National not ruling out forming a government with Winston Peters, but potentially handing him a platform, a party whose platform thus far has been on the fringes, today releasing a gender policy around who can use public bathrooms, but Luxon, intentionally or not, may have just handed Winston Peters a more mainstream hand to play.
So obviously we're going to get to that one from Winston Peters. But there you go. I just think this idea of this coalition now made up of conspiracy theorists, they're not libertarians, they're pseudo-libertarians who want to cut $1 billion out of the budget on day one, and led by, respectfully, evangelical Christian who thinks that abortion is tantamount to murder. What's that coalition? And I think we might have some suggestions in the text there. Should we put some of those out there?
Yep.
There's a U missing. It's cuts. That's all there is. Just one single U.
Yeah, it's definitely cuts.
Yeah.
Definitely nothing else. We got a coalition of crooks. But, from a marketing point of view, you kind of want to jazz that up a little bit, swap the K's out.
K for cat. You mean K for cat? Is that the way of swapping it out?
K for cat.
Yeah.
Coalition of cookers.
Yeah.
Can I just acknowledge as well just two wrongs don't make a white.
I do think, not to
Being-
defend him, but I do think that was obviously historic footage that hasn't been.
No,
this
it
time.
was.
Yeah, okay.
But it's still the same person.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, how can this guy still be hanging around when he got on a stage and said that in front of a crowd and cameras, and we're talking about him coming back in? Like, just, I despise Winston for this sort of shit.
And National today has given him two things that he will definitely build audience on. That's the first one, the housing one, because even if they're not going to do it, Luxon not ruling it out or in, whichever is the correct way, Luxon not saying, no, we're not going to change that, has given him fodder for the next 2 or 3 weeks. And as we heard last night, this is the time that people make their minds up, right, for the next 2 or 3 weeks to go on and on and on and on against foreign investment. So they've given him that. And when we get to the gender conversation, where Nicola Willis was hoisted by her own petard, by trying to have a foot in both camps, not servicing the audience that they are starting to build as their voters, and not actually going the other way and denouncing it all. They've given him foothold to drag all those people out of National who wanted her to confirm that only biological women should use toilets. And then also these Democracy New Zealand voters and stuff will all be seeing Winston now as a possibility, and they could be moving that way. So two things today. National has given Winston more of a foothold than he was starting to build.
Both parties have, like, every day that they don't rule him out as a coalition partner is the more that he will grow in power. And yet people will forget that Winston is only there for Winston. He doesn't care about the views of the voters that put him there. Once he's in there, get fucked. He'll never listen to you again. Because he's there. That's the goal.